Good morning, 5:08 AM, and I'm down at Mrs. Macquarie's Chair this morning. If you're from Sydney, you will know is one of the most popular photography locations. I've got here, it's about an hour before sunrise. Sunrise is at 6:01 AM, and I'm just looking for the perfect spot. So I've come down here for a couple of reasons. One of them is that I've got this new HDR software that I've been sent to test, and I can't tell you anything about it. It's top secret, but it will be released in about a week, and I'll be able to tell you more about it. And then the second reason is that I've got a bit of a dilemma with wide angle lenses. And if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know I have a 14-24 Nikon lens stolen from me last year, which is like the mecca of wide angle lenses for landscape photographers. And I'm trying to decide whether or not to get another one. And the reason for that is I have got a 14-24 millimeter Lee filter kit. You know, that Lee filter kit, I don't know, cost me a bomb, and you know, I'm just not using it. But it has a lot of drawbacks. They don't have a 10 stop or a big stopper with it at all. You know, it doesn't have a circular polarizing filter fitment at all, and it has a whole bunch of light leakage as well, and you get lots of light coming into the lens, and it's not very ideal. Just like I said, as I'm talking to you, I'm just trying to find a good composition, because there will be plenty of photographers down here. I like this composition where I am. I'll show you that shortly. Yeah, so it has all these drawbacks, and it's huge, right? It's a huge filter kit. I've never seen a filter kit as big as that Lee filter kit, but it's huge, so it's a bit of a pain in the butt. That's probably the easiest way to put it. So what I've got with me today, the other thing that I wanted to do, so besides trying to shoot some HDR, so I need something with a lot of dynamic light range, is I want to test out two lenses. I've got my 16-35 millimeter f4 with me, and I've got my 17-35 millimeter f2.8 with me. And once I've set up, I'm going to shoot with both lenses. I'm not going to move the camera. I'm just going to switch lenses. I'm going to shoot with both, and then we'll have a look at the different images and see if we can tell any difference. And that'll help me decide whether or not I just buy a new filter kit for the 77mm thread on one of those lenses, or do I go back to using my 14-24. So that's what we're going to do. So I've got my composition all sorted. I'll just sort of show you what it is I'm doing, and just so you get a feel for the way I'm thinking about this shot. I've got my tripod set up nice and low, as you can see there, and the reason for that is, if I get down, you can sort of probably see that better. As you can see that I've got it framed up sort of like that, with the tree in the foreground, or the grass, and then the harbour bridge and the opera house in the background there, and that'll be a really nice shot. I've got the 17-35 millimeter 2.8 lens on the camera at the moment, and I'm just waiting for the sun to come up. Now the reason I've chosen this location today is I know that I can shoot away from the sun into the opera house and the harbour bridge, and my rule of thumb is this: if it's a cloudless sky, shoot away from the sun. Find something that the sun is going to light up as it rises, and use that beautiful golden light as you know, the big feature in your photo. Because shooting into the sun without a cloud in the sky is very harsh, and once you get that beautiful golden hue on the horizon, it can work depending on where you are. It's going to be very quick, and it's going to be very hard to really maximize you know, the colors, because there's no clouds for the colors to bounce off of. So my rule of thumb is cloudless sky, shoot away from the sun. Cloud-filled sky, shoot towards the sun. And if you use that rule, anytime you get up for landscape photography and you see the sky is clear like today, as you can see there's not a cloud in the sky, then you know, always find a spot where you can shoot away from the sun and take advantage of the golden rays as they kiss whatever it is that you're shooting, whether it be a mountain or a building or a bridge or the opera house or whatever it might be, or trees. It's 5:37 AM, about 25 minutes before sunrise, and the light is just gorgeous. So I'm using this opportunity to take some sort of 10-15 second exposures. I've got the camera on aperture priority, and I've just gone to f9. I've got the 17-35 millimeter lens on. I'm doing a 15-second exposure, so we'll see how that goes. But the light is just gorgeous. Right now is the best time to be taking photos. I'm also going to get some when the sun comes up as well. It seems I've picked a morning when there's about, I don't know, 200 school kids have come down here for some excursion, which is strange for a 5:30 on a Sunday morning, but there you go. That's the sort of things that happen. Okay, I'm going to switch out lenses now. I'm going to try the 16-35 and just see what the difference is. And I'm going to use the same settings. I'll use f9 and I'll use the same composition, and we'll have a look at the two different photos. Alright, just switched to the 16-35 and giving that a whirl. Now, it's really important if you are using a lens like this with image stabilization that when you stick it on your tripod, you've got to switch that image stabilization off, otherwise you're going to end up in all sorts of bother. But the light, I've got to say, the light is just getting better and better and better this morning. So I'm doing f9 10 seconds. I've got ISO 64, which is the base ISO for the D810, and my number one rule with ISO is you go as low as you can go. If your camera goes down to 100, put it at 100. If it goes to 200, put it at 200. Just go as low as it can go. So just switch back to the 7-35, and I've just decided to modify my setting slightly. So I'm still at f9, which I think gives me the best depth of field and sharpness for this lens. And one of my tricks is I put it onto autofocus. I'll get the lens to autofocus, and then I'll switch it back to manual focus, and then I can take the shot. So I'm now trying the 7-35. I've got ISO 64, f9, 2 seconds. Just waiting for some people who've realised they've just walked into my shot. So hopefully they'll move on pretty quickly. So getting here early was a good idea because there are a lot of photographers down here now, a lot of people, and most of them are pretty good. They're not going to stand in front of you. But definitely getting here an hour before sunrise. I was the first photographer here. There was one guy down here fishing, but that was all. So I've just changed my settings slightly. I'm at f9, which is giving me 1 second with the amount of light that we've got now. I've got the 17-35mm lens on at the moment, just testing that out. ISO 64, as I said before, I like to go as low as I can with ISO. So with ISO, go as low as you can go. But I've also brought the exposure value down 1 stop. Now the reason I've done that is all the lights that are on the bridge and behind the bridge were overexposing. I want to try and get everything exposed right. And in photography, if you overexpose, it's really hard to fix that, to bring those overexposed things back down. But it's really easy to push the shadows back up, especially with a low ISO, without creating too much noise, which is that yucky stuff you see in dark images sometimes. So I always say underexpose a little bit. If you're unsure, then take several exposures. Do a -1, do a 0, maybe do a -2. So the light's really starting to get intense now. It is exactly 10 minutes before sunrise, and we have these beautiful colours in the sky. I've still got the 17-35 on, and I'm shooting at ISO 64, as I said before, always go as low as I can, still at f9. It's now ½ a second, and that's with a -1 exposure value. Those people that are in the way, I just went and chatted to them and asked them if they could move. And never be afraid to do that, by the way, because they didn't realise they were in my shot. And when I asked if she would mind moving, she was more than happy to move out of the way. And that means I don't have to do any photoshopping later, it just makes my life easier. So I'm going to take a couple more with the 17-35, and then I'm going to switch back to the 16-35, and I have no idea which lens is going to be better, or if I'll even be able to pick. It's one of the cool things about this time of the morning is how the hues of colours in the sky change, and right now there's this beautiful, I don't know, like a pink purple hue in the sky. So my settings have changed again slightly, and the reason for that is I'm actually in aperture priority, and I shoot all my landscape in aperture priority because that way I can control the depth of field, and I let the camera take care of the shutter speed. I'm at ISO 64 f9, and now it's at 1/4 of a second, and that's just due to the amount of light, and I'm still at -1 exposure value. 6:04 AM, so 3 minutes after sunrise, and the light is just hitting the Harbour Bridge in the Opera House. The light's about halfway down the pylon at the moment. I'm just waiting for it to get to the bottom of the pylon, and then I think I'll be pretty happy. I've got the 16-35 on there. If you're wondering what that is, that's just my iPhone on the top doing a time lapse, which you'll see at some point during this video. The settings change a fair bit because the sun, as the sun comes up, the light is increasing. Now, ideally what I want here is I want a fast shutter speed because of the foliage on the tree is moving around. I don't want that blurry. I'm at f9, -1 exposure value. I've got 1/13 of a second at the moment, ISO 64. And that light, once again, I'm just waiting for that light to hit all of that pylon. I'm just wondering if the pre-sunrise shots are going to be better than the post-sunrise shots, and of course I've been trying the different lenses, so we'll see. You know, we'll sort of get a feel for whether the 16 to 35 or the 17 to 35 is better, or does it make any difference. You know, with image quality. We'll have a look. It's interesting, I know I mentioned a couple of times that I'm shooting at -1 exposure value, and even at -1 I'm still getting some blown out highlights now that the sun's come up, and the difference between the foreground and the background is getting fairly big. So I'm going to change to maybe bracketing my shots, and we'll try this new HDR software I was talking about. So I'm going to set the camera up now to take a -2, a 0 and a +2, and then I can blend all three together in the HDR software afterwards. So I've now set it up for HDR, and if you have a listen, I'll hit the trigger once and it'll take 3 shots. Three separate exposures. So you can see that one there is overexposed in the sky, but it exposes the trunk of the tree in the foreground beautifully. The middle one is my normal exposure, which has some flashing highlights in the background there, and then you can see this one looks quite underexposed, but all the stuff that's in the background there is no longer flashing. So it means that everything is properly exposed, and I'll be able to blend those together in the HDR software I've got to check out. So it's now 6:13 AM, so it's 12 minutes past sunrise, and I thought I'll just take this opportunity to show you a bit through my composition, because it was a bit dark earlier. But my thinking with this composition was to frame the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, as you can see is done by that tree, and then you've got this leading line down here leading you into the image, and then you've got this framing from this tree here. A good foreground interest in the grass. There's not a lot there, but it's enough for you to give perspective. In my composition, I'm always thinking about how do I get as much foreground interest as I can without taking away from the main subject. And whilst the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge are extremely small in this image, you'll see it'll be a big impact. Now I will probably crop for a bit of a pano. In fact, I know I will, just because this foreground down here is a little bit boring. So I will crop it, and that'll be a nice panoramic image. Alright, now we get to the time of the video where I'm going to explain what I found is the differences between the two lenses, and we'll have a look at the HDR image. This first image was taken with the 17 to 35mm f2.8 lens, and whilst sharp in the center, was soft towards the edges, which I've got to say surprised me a little bit. The next image was taken with the 16 to 35mm f4 lens. Now this particular image is sharp throughout the entire frame. There was very little or no distortion that I had to remove in post-processing, and the quality of this image was fantastic. So I've got to say the 16 to 35mm f4 is the lens I will be using in the future. I'll get a filter kit to fit this one. The final image is of the HDR version. This is 3 exposures, a -2, a 0 and a +2, imported into the HDR software I'm not yet allowed to tell you about. However, what I did find was it's like most other HDR software, it struggles with a plain blue sky, and you can see the haloing around the tree. Well, that's a wrap. Another gorgeous sunrise. Just heading back to the car. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Lots more to come.